There you go.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false news
has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
The following is a pattern interruption of your regularly scheduled brainwashing program.
Welcome to the Reality OS. I'm Peter Duke, and I'm joined with Tracy Connors, and we are here to talk about what's going on in the news. How you doing, Tracy?
I'm good, Peter. How are you?
I'm a little overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed by the news, and then I've got a client that I'm helping move a website from one. They've been deplatformed, and I'm moving them from one host to another. So it's a bit stressful, but it's under control.
And when that's successfully completed, you'll be able to share with us all about that experience.
Yeah, I will. It's really interesting because they're being deplatformed from a platform that has celebrated itself on the under the banner of free speech, and it turns out that speech isn't so free there. So
we keep finding that, don't we?
Yeah.
All right, and we got a lot of new folks here with us today, so we have to say special thank you to John and George for telling their audiences to come join us. It looks like they listen, so thank you.
Yeah, I think Addie was telling people too.
Yeah.
I noticed that Addie had taken our intro and posted it up on his channel, and then I think on that Neighborhood News Hour, and then that started a little action because the Neighborhood News Hour is now trying to get their intro together, and it seems that our branding ourselves has had an impact on other people, which I think is good because we all need to be branding ourselves.
Yeah, and I don't think it hurts to show that video of the Mockingbird media repeating whatever they're told to over and over again.
Deborah wants to know if Flynn is the Kraken. I have some information on all of that. I don't know how accurate it is, but I have it. So
yeah, that's kind of what we wanted to get into, right?
That is what we wanted to get into today, because it seems like when you realize that the mainstream media isn't capable of giving you the information that you need in order to make valuable decisions, you start looking other places, and then you start realizing that all the other places that you're looking, either the people are misinformed, ill-informed, or they're deliberately creating false narratives, and whether that's deliberate or not deliberate, coming up with a strategy or filtering mechanism for trying to figure out what's going on, I think is important in this environment, because there is going to be no quote-unquote authoritative source. You're not going to be able to go and find that one talking head that's going to be able to answer all the questions for you.
Right. One of the tricks that you and I have used is going to Wikipedia and believing the opposite of what they tell you about disputed issues or controversial subject matter, those kind of things.
Or starting off with the question, what's missing here? Right?
Yeah.
Because there's always a lot of, Mark Kulak was kind of the guy who led me in that direction with his first big discoveries about Jeff Bezos and his origin story, which made me start questioning all the origin stories eventually. But that was the first domino for me.
Right. It's kind of starting with the idea of who put this idea in my head in the first place. How did I arrive at this opinion? Is it my own, or was it given to me?
Right. And you and I are on that private research thread that's feeding information into the lawyers that are doing all of the actions right now. And and we were talking about I liked. I said the law is Santa Claus, and then you respelled Santa Claus CLAWS, Santa Claus, which I found quite humorous.
Well, it's a decent brand. But I mean, I watched today I guess it was yesterday, that the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has decided not to. They've kind of just, I think they rendered it moot, the point that was raised by a bunch of different Pennsylvania officials, either elected or that were running for election. They challenged the constitutionality of the mail-in votes in Pennsylvania. And if you just read it, they put the clear language of the Constitution in their lawsuit and the process therein for amending how votes are allowed to happen in the state. So as it currently stands, you're only allowed to vote in person on the day of the election or by absentee ballot. And in order to get an absentee ballot, you have to fill out all this paperwork and stuff like this. So there are some checks to it. And so the argument put forth by Sean Purnell is probably the most famous name on the docket there. And he was running in Western Pennsylvania against Connor Lamb, who is only a first-term Democrat congressperson out of that area. So that's like Pittsburgh suburbs. And in their suit, they said, look, yes, this was passed by the legislature last fall to say it was okay to do vote by mail. But the way this works is it has to get voted on again in the next session and passed. And then it goes to the entire state, and it becomes almost like you have in California, Peter, a ballot initiative, because it's a constitutional amendment. Right. So the people of the state get to vote on it. It doesn't just, we can't bypass all of that because, some people got a cold.
Because feels.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're using all this hysteria and emergency situations, and yes, we'll get to all these rumors in a second here. So I've heard a lot of these things that infidel apostate's saying, and also what Jacqueline's saying. I'd be interested to know what Candace Owens' big win over the fact checkers was. Anyway, so yeah, I see the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania just disregard the fact that something is blatantly unconstitutional and say, meh. That's why I say it's Santa Claus.
Right, exactly. And, you can, as I used to say to my daughter when she got to that age where people were questioning Santa Claus in school, I said to her, I said, look, if you don't believe, you don't receive. So if you... If you don't believe in Santa Claus, you're not going to get presents from Santa Claus anymore. So you tell me what you want to do. It's up to you.
Oh, I want to believe.
I want to believe. I want to believe. I was going back and forth with George Webb on Twitter this week, because even though I don't... I was thinking about this. There's a guy named Antonio Barabasi who wrote a book called Linked, which it's basically about network theory, but it's written in English. So I highly recommend it. I should probably put it on the list. And
I'm making a note.
And he talks about how long story short, Einstein's original statement of God doesn't throw dice comes from the idea that these two Hungarian network theory graph theory guys, Erdős and Rényi, were always trying to do graph analysis, but they didn't have a big enough data set, and so they were using random numbers. And Einstein criticized them and said God doesn't throw dice. The point is that when the internet happened, all of a sudden there were all these graph theories that had kind of been floating around unproven for decades. And when the internet showed up, you could suddenly start to kind of prove these things. And so one of the big takeaways from the book is that in networks you have links and you have nodes, and then in between a node you have links, nodes, and hubs. So a node is an individual data point. A link is something that connects two data points together, and then you've got multiple links going into one node. That's a hub. And the big breakthrough that Larry Page had when he was creating the PageRank algorithm is that those links between nodes have parameters, and you can weight them. And I was thinking this morning, because George was, I gave George some information that I got from Thomas Wichter. Thomas Wichter is a guy that I listen to with a giant grain of salt. I used to subscribe to him or I followed him on Twitter, but then after a while I didn't know why, but I just felt like there was more noise than signal, and I stopped following him. Then he got banned off of Twitter, and now he popped up on YouTube again. And one of my issues with him is that he's got a very hypnotic style, and people who have hypnotic styles, I get little spidey senses going up, thinking, you're very persuasive. Like, is the point that you're trying to sell something through here, or what's actually going on? But Thomas Wichter had, and I've gotten off of the Barabasi.
Yeah, and then I'm thinking Thomas Wichter looks like Ted Kaczynski, and then I was just listening to somebody read the Unabomber's manifesto yesterday and thinking, holy crap. It's like he condensed Eric Hoffer's True Believer into like a couple pages at the beginning of that thing. Anyway, we digress. We have to do a whole episode on the Unabomber manifesto.
Anyway, the long story short is that I do listen to Wichter, but I'm only interested in what he's talking about directionally. Barnes says Wichter is very high noise to signal. But here's the thing. So it was Wichter that originally called out the CISA that put it on my radar, which was
the CISA is the one that was run by the guy with the fancy socks, right?
Yeah, Krebs, right. And then I went and I chased that down and figured out that Krebs, if the CISA was in charge of securing the election, Krebs was certainly the wrong guy to pick, because he was posting pictures of his socks. And very shortly after that, he got fired. But Wichter did point me towards CISA. So,
and what's that acronym stand for again? Do you remember? Not that it matters. I can look it up while you keep talking.
Yeah, you can figure it out.
Yes, Kaczynski was MK Ultra.
Yeah, he was MK Ultra, right. So, where was I?
Krebs.
Krebs, yeah. So, but Wichter did point me in that direction, right? So Wichter did a video yesterday where he was talking about how he thought the Iranian nuclear scientist who was quote unquote assassinated actually wasn't assassinated, that he was kidnapped, and that it was an operation that was designed to make it look like he had been assassinated. And he claims that his expertise for doing that is that he used to work for some government intelligence agency doing after action reports.
This is Wichter says that was his job?
That's what Wichter claims in the video. Yeah.
Thank you, Barnes.
And to that end, I thought it was interesting to take a look at. So I showed it to George because George had been tweeting something about the assassination of the Iranian scientist, and I just I called out and I let him know that Wichter thinks that it was a school play, and a school play with some Iranian guards' brains blown out all over the street, but still a school play.
It's good effects, Peter.
It is, and you can use Jell-O. So
it doesn't really work all that well, but go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway,
making fake blood is really difficult. It's corn syrup and a lot of red dye.
I just used to buy it from Mole Richardson.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point was that I just wanted to point it to George, and then George started questioning the veracity of Wichter, and that's totally okay. Like, sure. I was just pointing and saying, hey, Wichter says that he thinks this is a school play. So so it brought me back to the whole idea of veracity, right? And when you're looking at sources, you kind of have to have a scale, which is, well, how much do I believe this, and how much value do I actually see in it? Because the value that you think that you're going to get out of it is going to determine how much time you're willing to put into consuming it, right? Mm-hmm. And some of the things, like I was watching a lot of Fletcher, you were talking about Fletcher Prouty, and I was catching up on Fletcher Prouty last night. And it occurred to me while I was watching it that, well, this has been around for a while, right? So people have had a chance to kind of kick the tires on it, and so the veracity of the Fletcher Prouty claim seems to be pretty high. So, because you would think that somebody would have popped up and said, "Oh no, this guy is totally full of it," and here's reason A, B, and C why, and that hasn't really happened. So you look at Fletcher Prouty and you think, "Oh, it's
Right. And for those who don't know about Fletcher Prouty,
Fletcher Prouty was one of the original Pentagon guys who was working doing logistics for the CIA before they had their own Air Force. So,
and he was running between, because I started reading one of his books, which is called The Secret Team.
Yeah.
And he was the one that was the liaison of information sharing between the CIA and the Pentagon.
Correct.
And he says in his book, I thought it was really interesting that when the Pentagon Papers came out, he was like, I wrote half of those papers, and like they were just sitting around in drawers and places. It wasn't this super secret stuff. It was kind of mundane as far as he was concerned. It wasn't the real juicy stuff that was allowed to go out with Ellsberg.
Right, but that's because Ellsberg was dispatched, I think, by Colby. Colby,
who was the head of the CIA at the time.
Colby was the head of the CIA, and Colby was trying to distract from the bad stuff that the CIA was doing and kind of hang the mess ups in Vietnam on the Pentagon. So. Yeah,
and just from his own words, I found this in the Secret Team book. So he explains what a briefing officer is. That's what he was. And he says, for 9 consecutive long years, during those crucial days from 1955 through January 1st of 1964, I was one of those briefing officers. I had the unique assignment of being the focal point officer for contacts between the CIA and the Department of Defense on matters pertaining to the military support of special operations. So this is a guy that knew everything.
Right. He knew everything, but he also seemed to have more freedom than anybody else at that moment in time to be able to talk about stuff, which is interesting because a lot of those people didn't live long who were talking about stuff. So
yeah, it is shocking. And like I just said, he got out January 1st, 1964. And I have to believe it's tied to the JFK assassination because he's in the Oliver Stone movie. He's called Mr. X.
Mr. X.
That's Fletcher Prouty. And his whole story is they sent him to Antarctica, of all places, when JFK was going to Dallas. And on his way back, he stops in New Zealand. And he's in New Zealand when Kennedy is shot. And he sees a newspaper that has an entire write-up of Lee Harvey Oswald, including a picture of Oswald in a 3-piece suit with a full bio and everything like that. And when he gets back to the States, he realizes that he's gotten more information in that New Zealand paper than was put out to the American public. The photograph he couldn't find anywhere else, all these things.
Well, what he discovered, I think that his discovery was that newspaper article had come out in New Zealand 4 hours before Lee Harvey Oswald had been arrested in the United States of America.
I thought it was arraigned.
I thought he said arrested, but maybe. It might have been arraigned.
Either way, they had way too much information way too fast.
Right. And at which point he recognized it as an operation because he had been participating in many of them.
Yeah, so he's an interesting source to dig into if you want to kind of start at base level and think, okay, maybe this guy can be trusted. I don't know. But he was at least close to the highest echelon of power.
Right, which brings me to the stuff that I was listening to last night. I'm trying to see if I can pull it up here. Starting with, I heard an interview with Michael Flynn, and I think his name is McInerney. Here it is. On a channel that I've never seen before, which other people here may have heard of. Hang on a second. And it's called Greg Kelly Reports. I don't know, is it Greg Kelly Reports? Anyway, I, I listened to a channel last night, and I'll pull it up the next time you start talking. I'll go find it.
Okay. And they can also pull the links and put them in the description. And
Yeah, it was the first interview with Michael Flynn that he's done since he got pardoned.
oh,
Was
okay. I didn't realize he had done an interview.
Yeah, he did it yesterday on this kind of oddball. I'm saying that with my apologies.
Odd, you mean not high profile.
Not well known. A channel I had never heard of before. They had good production value, but
Good.
I'd never heard of them before. It looked like a kind of a Christian right wing news network, and my spidey sense immediately went to, okay, this is an intelligence operation.
Why? Because they have good they have good production value.
Yes, yes. So
All right. So note to everybody, we're totally compromised.
well, I look at people who don't have, like, you have a job, right? And I'm running around doing consulting work right now in order to pay my rent. So we're not driving around in Jaguars or broadcasting from a big set with a giant budget. Nobody's written us a big check to be here. So whenever I look at even if it's a small setup, if somebody's in a studio, for example, I'm thinking, okay, well, they've got sponsorship. Somebody's paying for this. Like,
I don't
who's
know.
paying?
It could be their garage.
Yeah, and there are people I know who have really good looking stuff in their garage.
Yeah, Jimmy Dore for one.
I
His
mean,
side is
Lee
fantastic.
does a great job from the end of his bedroom, but
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. If you're familiar with the business and know how to set stuff up, or have an AV nerd in your close proximity that's willing to do it for a couple bucks.
right. So anyway, the first George suspicious as well.
I think she's talking about the interview that you're speaking about right now with Flynn.
Oh, George was suspicious as well. Okay, so yeah, and that's the whole point. It's like I think you should listen to this stuff. I just think that you need to take everything with a giant grain of salt at this point. So for the first 40 minutes, Flynn talked, and there's a lot of people out there who are like, rah rah Flynn. Flynn is the greatest thing ever, and Flynn got in trouble because he made a deal with Turkey, okay, and he didn't disclose it, and that wound up becoming the vector for his entire prosecution. And regardless of whether or not you thought he should have been persecuted for it, somebody who's supposed to be the head of the National Security Council probably shouldn't be making bad decisions. It either shows some kind of ignorance or deceit, which is it just looks bad if you're the head of an agency. So
Well, and it's also an angle to compromise him on.
right, and they did compromise him on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to that end, I think Michael Flynn's a great guy. I wish him well, and maybe it's a good thing that he didn't wind up being the national security advisor. I don't know. So the first 40 minutes of this interview was Michael Flynn, and I've let you know what I think about Michael Flynn. The second part was the guy who brought Michael Flynn in, who's a 3-star general named McInerney, I believe, and I think Phil. I just saw Phil on the channel. I think that he was the commander of the Tunisia or the Tripoli raid that Phil was on when he was in the United States Navy, and McInerney was talking about Hammer and Scorecard, and that he named the intelligence regiment that has been doing the intelligence surveillance on the
Elections.
election. I think it was called the 305th Intelligence Regiment, or the 305th. It's on my timeline. I tweeted about it. And their nickname, the nickname of the unit, is the Kraken. So his understanding that what I think last night was the first time that it was reported was that the Kraken is the 305th Intelligence Regiment, and that they have been working behind the scenes on all of this stuff. And he also said that there was that the raid on the server farm in Frankfurt, Germany was again, this is his information. I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying this is what he said, is that the raid in Frankfurt, Germany was U.S. Army Special Forces, Delta Force, versus CIA contractors in a CIA protected facility. That is, the United States Army Special Forces went in, and that there were casualties.
Really?
This is what he reported.
So, hang on for a second. Can I ask a couple questions about this?
You may.
Okay. So one of the pushbacks that I heard about the idea that there was even a raid in Germany is that you can't do that. You can't just invade German soil. But what you're saying now is that this was a CIA outpost, almost like the safe house in Benghazi, then I don't know, does that fall under American soil, like say an embassy would?
Well, that would fall in line with other things that I heard, that the raid was on quote unquote American soil.
So that's how you get around that whole, well, we didn't just go invade Germany, like,
Right.
but that's interesting. So,
right. And again, I don't know that,
and then that ties into all the other chatter we're kind of hearing about this, the order that Kennedy put through.
Yeah, National Security Act 57 or National Security Directive 57.
And he was never able to act on it. And that's the whole shuffle up over at, what is it, DOD?
At the again,
Esper getting the axe. And
Esper got the axe, and then a guy named Chris Miller, who I believe they made a movie about him in Afghanistan because he created a special unit that used horses in Afghanistan. So I think they actually made a movie about him. I may have that.
No, I've heard the same thing. I'll fact check you.
Somebody needs to fact check me on it. It's my pinned tweet. Lieutenant General McInerney says the 305th Military Intelligence Battalion is the Kraken. Okay, and then I added in a thread all of the other notes to this. So he made it. So the other thing that happened is that when Esper was fired, then Chris Miller, who is acting Defense Secretary for Special Operations, took direct control of all Special Operations. And I think that what's implicit in that they're not saying is that there were some special forces that were tasked under CIA, which would mean that my understanding of it would be, and people can fact check me on this, is that what Trump has done is that he's taken whatever military special forces were under the aegis of the Central Intelligence Agency back. He took them back away from the Central Intelligence Agency.
And that's my understanding of all the stuff that I've listened to. So that's Dark Journalist, who just came on my radar, and I don't know how I didn't know about that guy for years. He's got a ton of content. He did pretty good deep dives into this whole thing with this Order 57 that JFK put in and then never was able to trigger. And then Prather has just come onto my radar as well. Jeffrey Prather,
right?
And he is supposed to be a intelligence operative, whistleblower type that's kind of confirming all these things that you're saying. So when you get into this chaos of information, it's kind of pick a couple people that you believe based on their credentials, I guess, because that's all we have to go on, and that you could substantiate and say, okay, would that person be in a position to know these things? Yes or no?
Right. So here's the red flag on all of this for me. And I'm not saying, I follow Prather. I would say that on my veracity scale, he's high. He's definitely like much higher than Thomas Wichter, right? For example.
Sure.
To that end, and I would put McInerney, based on what I heard last night, and I've only heard him talk once, I would put him probably up there with Prather. You have to, but having consumed Steve Pachenik for years on InfoWars, Steve Pachenik also a psychological operations guy, and I highly suspect of Steve Pachenik. And here's the issue. The issue is that if you want to freeze people in their chairs in front of their computers and keep them from going out into the streets, because going out into the streets ultimately winds up becoming the thing that politicians are more afraid of than anything else. As long as Mark Kulak calls it hopium, right? As long as you can continue to provide people with information that keeps them attached to their phone or sitting in front of their computer instead of getting out of their house and out onto the street, then you can effectively diffuse whatever kind of civil insurrection problem that you may have. And so there is a very good reason for giving people hopium. And you just got to be careful when you're consuming all this information that you're not. I mean, how many 4 years people have been saying trust the plan, right? Trust Sessions, trust Huber, trust Durham, trust Barr, like no indictments in 4 years, right? So basically, for 4 years, if people didn't have that hopium, if people didn't think, if they weren't putting all of this energy into, there are things going on behind the scenes that are gonna take care of all of this, and I don't have to do anything except continue going to Walmart, then they win, right? So that's why I'm highly suspect of hopium.
I am too. But I wanted to answer a question that Infidel asked a while back about Discord. And I don't see the point in jumping to Discord, Infidel, because they've completely eliminated certain rooms with undesirables before. So I don't trust that platform either. I don't know if there's any real safe platform at this point in time.
Yeah, that's why we're on all of them.
Right, right.
I mean, if you look at where Tracy and I think we're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 platforms right now.
Yeah, and then I upload to a couple others like BitChute and Brand New Tube, and yeah.
Right. I'm not telling you that you should take another course. I'm telling you that you should just be careful. And I was thinking this morning. I was talking to my daughter, and one of the big breakthroughs that I had in my life is understanding that confusion and disappointment feel the same. It's the same feeling, and it's just a different interpretation of it. And if instead of feeling, the next time you feel down about something, ask yourself the question, am I really depressed or am I just confused? Because if the answer is I'm just confused, that's a lot easier to try to figure out how to manage than, I'm depressed. Trying to figure out how to make yourself feel better is a challenge sometimes, but trying to figure out how to make yourself more knowledgeable, that's a little bit more attainable.
Well, like I said, there's no safe platform. That's why we're on all of them. And I agree with your point, Peter. And that's a good way to think through that situation of being depressed or confused. And I think confusion can lead to that because it's just so overwhelming. Usually you become confused when an outcome happens that you weren't anticipating.
Right.
And then you kind of have to refigure your entire worldview. And I think a lot of us are going through that right now. To get back to your Kubler-Ross, the stages. Yeah, I mean, that's all of that is coping with confusion. Because now you have to reorient your world.
I tried to make that a tweet, but Twitter only lets you have 4 entries on a poll. The tweet was going to be mood, ? Anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Yeah.
But it would only let me do 4.
Yes, and we are uploading to Rumble. It just takes a little bit, and that makes me anxious when it takes forever. Anyway.
So I was thinking a lot about frameworks this week too, because I think that I posted some polls. How patient are you? And one poll, it said Robespierre or Napoleon.
And then the other one said,
and-
"Who's
and-
Napoleon and
and-
Robespierre?"
No, the other one said Trotsky, Lenin, Stalin. Um,
Again, it's like
it's a it's
I
a
mean,
kind
your
of
daughter probably knows who those people are, but I doubt most teenagers have heard those three names.
Well, I wasn't targeting at
No,
my,
no, I
at my
understand.
daughter,
I
but,
understand.
and I just started thinking about, and then I had another poll, which was, would you rather do, it was Trump, Trump Israel, or Democrats deep state, I think.
No, I thought you told
no.
me it was deep state military industrial complex.
yeah,
No,
that's right,
military
right.
industrial complex CIA.
Yes,
Who would
military-
you rather?
Yeah, that's right. Military
Wonderful.
industrial complex, CIA, or Trump Israel. Because a lot of people are, highly critical of Israel, but at this point, I'm starting to look at things like Hunter Biden's laptop, and I'm going, how did they get that? Who really hacked that, right? And then you start looking at the motivations of. There's a lot of. So if you understand the strategy of tension, which is the Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Julius Caesar strategy of getting your enemies to fight with one another so that you can own them. Then, I'm always suspect whenever I hear, oh, China did this or Russia did that, or Russia and China are really the big problems, or Trump is Hitler, or anything that's always this kind of divisive speech. My little flags go up, and I'm asking myself the question.
Well, I've got a fun story for you on that one. I don't know that I told this when I went and finally got my hair cut a couple weeks ago.
Your hair looks good, by the way.
Thank you. And thank you to my hairdressers, who I love. And it's these sisters that moved here from South Korea. And in the course of chatting with the one of them that was cutting my hair, I found out that she worked at a Korean TV studio, which I thought was pretty cool. And she did makeup and hair for every single television show that was produced at the studio. So it was news and then soap operas and all this kind of stuff. So we kind of chatted about working in TV and make believe. And I always like to talk to them about Korean politics and what's going on north, south, whatever. And I said, what's the current kind of take on North Korea? And she said, it's very funny that when I lived in South Korea, we didn't pay any attention to North Korea at all. It wasn't this like big beast banging down our door, threatening us with all this stuff. Like nobody was afraid of him. And then she said she moved to the United States, and within a couple months, she had been so terrorized by the news that she's calling her mother back in Korea and being like, "Oh my God," this was Kim Jong-il at the time. She said, "He's going to kill all of you." And she said, "What are you talking about? Nothing is happening. Nothing has changed." And then she realized, oh, okay, the American media is hyping this up. They made him this gigantic enemy. And
Right.
It's just not true. When you talk to the people on the ground, they have no clue.
Well, one of the people who joined George and me down in San Diego was talking about the fact that when she was in South Korea and she went to the DMZ and watched somebody defect one day, and it was a big giant news story over there, and she came over here and nobody had ever heard of it.
No.
And it was at that point that she realized, oh, television is very regional. The messages that people get are completely controlled within those nations. So,
It's controlled everywhere.
yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that question, living soul, quickening spirit, but
What does it say?
I will take it under advisement. Confusion and disappointment between the human body, microflora, microbes. We will get back to you on that one. I know
Ask
someone who
Joe
can probably.
Rogan.
Yeah, no.
He's the world's leading authority.
But he doesn't really get into all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Now,
And-
where were we?
And when he starts talking about it, he talks about it with such authority too, which always just drives me crazy.
He does. Well,
Wait, what did somebody say about if you only knew?
the only new posted today with McKierney. Okay. And talking about the Mandela effect, that reminds me that there's this quote that's misattributed to Gandhi that goes like, first they ignore you and then everybody knows the rest of that, which I can't remember. I'm like Joe Biden with the thing. But I started thinking that we should kind of amend that quote to be at first they ignore you and then they make you disappear. That's the new media way of working with stories.
Yeah, remember Milo Yiannopoulos?
Yeah, it's gone. Gavin McInnes, Laura Loomer, they've just been completely erased.
Right.
But if you go into, I was kind of sharing it with one of our friends behind the scenes saying, when he was asking, when are reporters going to start asking Biden whether or not he thinks that the election was manipulated or anything like that? And it's just, they're not going to do it. To the left,
No.
there is no story here. And I showed him screen grabs from that Ground News application that I'm always touting that you can jump into the blind spot report. And there were 4 huge stories about the election that had zero coverage on the left. Zero. And zero in what they consider the mainstream. So that's CBS, NBC, ABC, all those guys. Not a peep. And it was about the election machines, possibly being tampered with. It was about the hearing in Pennsylvania that went on last Wednesday in Gettysburg with the state senators from Pennsylvania and Giuliani and a whole bunch of witnesses and what they had to say. These people have no idea on the other side of the bubble. Not a clue.
Yep. I was having to use Bitly this week. I don't know if anybody watching it, if the people are familiar with Bitly, but Facebook and Twitter were specifically blocking. They were blocking specific URLs from YouTube that were videos that people posted that were questioning the election integrity, including things like Tim Pool. And I would go to paste it, and the button wouldn't work. I would be clicking on the button. I posted a video of my trying to post a video on Facebook, and the button wouldn't click. It would click, but it wouldn't post. So I went to Bitly, which is a URL shortener where you can take a long URL and put it in there, and then it gives you a short URL version, and then it would post. So I could tell that there's a script running that says, oh no, we're not allowing this to run. And so, I was having to do that in order to be able to actually post things on Twitter and Facebook. But, I did the John Oliver video that I posted last week that was John Oliver talking about how voting machines are flawed and praising Donald Trump, which probably never happened ever again. That video got 500,000 views on Twitter, and I'm just remembering that it's gone off of my pinned tweet. And I know that my tweets are designed to time out after 2 weeks, but I think it was only up there for a week. So now I'm thinking, I wonder if they deleted my tweet.
Well, I know that they deleted a tweet of mine several years ago, 2016. I was taking a 3-day seminar course in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And it's the county seat for Chester County. And that's come on, people are more familiar with the surrounding counties of Philadelphia now, given all the election shenanigans. And I was upstairs on the second floor of this building, and I look out in the street, and I just happened to notice that there's somebody walking around with a camera crew. And I thought, well, that's weird. And then I looked a little closer, and I realized it was Martha Raddatz. I was like, well, that's funny. And this was right after the presidential debate that she hosted.
And
she moderated. Martha went, what? Sorry.
Where was it?
Westchester, Pennsylvania. So
and what was the event?
There was no event.
Okay.
That's the thing. There's no event there. It's a county seat, so you've got, it's kind of important. Other than that, the thing that little town is known for is they have a college there, Westchester College. Or Westchester University, I can't remember which. It's kind of a state teacher's school. And so I see her with a camera crew, and I thought, well, that's interesting. So I decided to walk outside and figure out what was going on. And I turned to everybody else in the room, and it's a bunch of libertarian, right-leaning people from different think tanks and C3s that were at this thing. And none of them seemed interested in going out and figuring out why Raddatz was in the street. So I just walked right up to her. And I was, dressed like a liberal, as I'm told that I am, leather jacket, boots, jeans. And she was I kind of just wandered around. I'm standing outside vaping, and she comes over to me and she's like, "Oh, hi, we're interviewing people about the election. Like, would you like to be interviewed?" I said, "No." But I was standing there and I had my cell phone. I was holding it kind of like this, and she didn't know that I had already hit record. So then I turned it around on her and I asked her, did you think that you were fair to Trump in the debate the other night? And she's like, "Oh, yes, of course," and all this stuff. So I recorded the whole thing and I put it on Twitter immediately. That tweet disappeared after sitting up there for maybe 3 or 4 years. I believe the video is still on my Facebook page. But I didn't realize it until way after the fact that they had just gone in and deleted it. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I got no warning, nothing about it. It just sat up there for 2-3 years, had 100,000 views or so, gone.
Yeah, somebody posted something about Barron Trump. So now I have to go back after we get off today and figure out whether or not it was, because it doesn't seem like I posted that John Oliver thing 2 weeks ago.
I think it could have been, Peter.
Could have been. Okay.
So to answer your question, if the Democrats control the voting system, they've been against Trump from the beginning. Why didn't Hillary win in 2016? My rationale for that is, Peter's right. It's scale. They did not anticipate him winning by that much of a margin. They didn't have those ballots stashed or people ready to pump votes into the system. You didn't have the mail-in ballot vector in that election, but the way that the Philadelphia judge of elections, who's been arraigned over the summer, he would just pop into the voting booth when no one was in there and ring up a couple votes for whoever he was supposed to be voting on behalf of there. So he could have jumped in, voted for Hillary 20 times, popped back out of the booth. And it's interesting, one of the people that offered testimony in front of the Senate hearing in Pennsylvania said that she was a Democrat that worked as a Republican poll watcher in one of the Philadelphia precincts as a favor to her mother, which is very nice. And like, you got to figure this woman is as close to a centrist Democrat as walks the face of the earth these days. And she had horror stories about the way that the election officials were behaving in the precinct where she was, including the judge of elections, who's supposed to be chained to that building all day. They should never leave the damn place. She said the woman just wandered off for 2 hours. They had issues that came up that require the judge of elections to weigh in. One of them being a woman coming in and saying, asking for her ballot. "No, you voted by mail," and her arguing with them. And then it became, what do we do? And then one of the other poll workers, she said, who was a Democrat, dressed in Biden gear, which is completely illegal. That's called electioneering. Yeah. You're not allowed inside of a polling place wearing that stuff. So that woman came up and said, "I want to vote now." And they're like, "Well, you already voted by absentee." And she's like, "Yeah, now I'm going to vote too." And nobody would stop her. And this woman was kind of trying to raise the alarm, and they ended up getting in her face and threatening her and cursing at her. And she was just appalled by the behavior of these people. So.
Yeah, but I mean, getting back to your original point about 2016, I think Donald Trump probably won by 25%. I believe that he was so popular that all of the normal systems that they had in place in order to ensure that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election were just completely blown out of the water, and he overwhelmed them by the level of his popularity. And to that end, I think that when all is said and done, that Donald Trump probably won the 2020 election bigger than any president has ever won any election ever.
Yeah, so the question becomes, do we ever get to the truth of this?
The GOP.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. They should have had a bunch of people register as Democrats. It's hard to infiltrate them, though.
So let's go back to the whole idea. I mean, one thing I want to disabuse people of is the idea that there's a dialectic. That is that there's a left and a right, a good guy and a bad guy, that there's one side and another side. There's lots of sides. One thing that I haven't heard anybody talk about, and Tracy, you can fact check me on this, is that if the Supreme Court says, okay, the election is hosed, let's go to Article 12 and kicks it to the Congress to pick the president, I do not believe the Congress is under any obligation to elect Donald Trump as the president.
They can elect anybody they want
I
to.
think they can elect Mitt Romney to be president. And so when you start to look at the GOP and you start to look at Ronna McDaniel, who is Mitt Romney's niece, and why the GOP isn't really putting a lot of energy into supporting the president right now, I am highly suspect. I'm highly suspect that they think, okay, that what they really want is that they want to get it to Congress, because what they're going to do is they're going to put Romney in, or they're going to call him the peacemaker. They're going to.
Yeah, I mean that would be an interesting,
Then I think you'd really have a civil war, though, because then you'd have both sides feeling like they've been dispossessed at the same time, instead of just one side feeling dispossessed.
Well, it depends on how quickly they want to escalate all of this stuff.
What's the word for being so bad the algorithms can't help you? I don't know. Overwhelmed. Is the word I'm using.
I don't know. Yep. Eric Coomer's MIA. All the people from Dominion are MIA. The Dominion folks
They're
were
on
supposed
Epstein
to show up.
Island. They're hiding with Epstein and Robert Maxwell, because none of them are really dead. They're with Elvis and Michael Jackson.
And the Iranian officials, allegedly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Although he's probably in Saudi Arabia.
Potentially.
If Victor is correct.
Well, the Saudis and the Israelis are now formally allied, right?
Yeah. And Tracy Twyman leads us down a path on why that could be true too. But I won't go off on that bird walk. Virtual hugs to both of you. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. My best to your mother, Phil. If she's watching, Phil's mom, I still love you, Mom.
That's very sweet.
She's great. Phil's mom is great. So anyway, so the point that I was making is that earlier about frameworks is that it's good to, guys like Ryan Dawson. I love Ryan Dawson, but he's like, everything is about the evil Zionists, right? And I think there are evil Zionists, and I also think there's Zionists who have no idea what the evil Zionists are doing. There's always this dichotomy, right? There's always this, there's the Bibi Netanyahu Mossad, and there's the Yahoo Barad Mossad in the United
Well,
States.
we could think about it. Weren't we talking about this the other day as nationalists versus globalists? And that may be a better framework to think about these intelligence agencies and the factions within them.
Or I was thinking about Americans versus globalists, because the thing that all of the, whether or not it's Milo Yiannopoulos or I can never get this right, Raheem Kassan, or even Patel, Kash Patel, like all these people who have all of these like quote unquote non-American names, or they come from other countries and they settle here. Like, the American idea is bigger than the United States, right? There's a lot of people who want to be American who live in France and England and Canada, and Faith Goldie and Lauren Southern and all of those other people.
Yeah, Ezra and everybody at Rebel.
Yeah, Ezra Levant, right? And they all are into American values, because the real values that the world loves are not United Nations values. They're American values. And it shouldn't be the United Nations. It should be the United States, of the world. But in order to do that, you've got to kind of buy into our Constitution, right? And our way of doing things. Although we haven't been doing such a good job for the last 50 years.
It's a little bit longer than that.
But the way I look at it is that you've got Americans and you have globalists. Americans believe in life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. All men are created equal, and the way that manifests itself. And then, you've got, the communist worldview, which seems to be everybody else, right? The globalists, Klaus Schwab and the United Nations and Trilateral Commission and Bilderbergers, and those people are all, essentially communists. And I think I was talking to you yesterday about Volkswagen, right?
Yeah, but are they communists, or would it be more? I don't know. I think of them as fascists.
Well, this is where the label thing starts to become confusing, because ultimately, communism as an idea is a way that's used in order to be able to take power by promising people something that you can't deliver. But what it allows you to do is centralize control. And once you centralize control, then you can kick your fascist program into high gear. So ultimately, what winds up happening is you promise everybody equality,
Bread and soil.
yeah, you have to, and then you get them to give up their sovereignty in order to be able to make the whole better. And you put a small group of people into control of the entire society, which is, and then you integrate government with
Corporations.
with corporations, which is ultimately fascism, which is what we have right now. When our government is making decisions based on what's best for Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, and Lockheed, then you're not any different than the Third Reich, except that the Holocaust has different furniture, right?
And better outfits. Thank you, Hugo Boss.
Hugo, yeah, they did have better outfits. Wait, what did he say he never considered?
Dark and light Zionists, yeah. You should consider that with every group.
Yeah, there's dark and light Republicans, there's dark and light Democrats, there's dark and light.
Right, like I've
everything.
talked about being on the ground at multiple lefty events, be it Occupy or the 2016 DNC in Philadelphia, and there's a clear split in the left. There is the Antifa, BLM, that, Black Bloc predated those guys. That's the violent, like, let's tear down the whole system kind of left. And then you do have the peace, love, anti-war left. And I watched those two factions battle it out in the street. And it's a little bit hard when you've got the kind that want to stick the flower in the butt of the rifle versus the kind that's the barrel of the rifle versus the kind that's literally standing there lighting stuff on fire and knocking down the security gates. So there is good and bad on both sides of everything.
We have the Richard Grinnell intelligence community, and we have the John Brennan intelligence community. I mean, they are at war right now. We're in a war. It's an information war at this point. And John Brennan is on one side, and Richard Grinnell is on the other in the
Right.
United States,
Bob Barr's MIA.
Bill Barr.
Or Bill Barr. His dad was Bob. Yeah, I don't know if you caught any of Trump was on Maria Bartiromo's show this morning. And she asked him, where is Bill Barr?
Right. Isn't Maria Bartiromo on the Council on Foreign Relations?
Yes, Peter, but there's good counsel on foreign relations and there's bad counsel on foreign relations. Did we not just go through all of this?
Yes, we did.
So you have to put that on everything. So I think Maria Bartiromo makes the cut of potentially being a good guy in there. And she said, where the hell is Bill Barr? And Trump's
Right.
like, I don't know. I have no idea. I keep asking, what the hell is the FBI doing? But then we see...
Well, Bobby Kennedy put a button on his desk that drove J. Edgar Hoover crazy, because when Bobby Kennedy pushed the button, he expected J. Edgar Hoover to come to his office.
Was it like the Matt Lauer button, where as soon as he comes in, you can lock the door behind him too?
It was kind of like that, yeah. But I think it literally turned on a light bulb in Hoover's office. That said Kennedy wants to talk to you.
Was he trying to get Hoover to retire?
I don't know. It was reported that the first conversation that Bobby Kennedy and J. Edgar Hoover had, Hoover wanted to let Kennedy know that he had started his position as director of the FBI before Bobby Kennedy was born. So.
Yeah, that's a good look. But that whole button thing just sounds like office politics to me, where you're just like, God, this person gets under my skin. How do I get under theirs? I know. I will install a button where I can summon them and they have to report to me because I'm the attorney general and I outrank them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, it's the angelic conflict. Phil is correct.
Yeah.
The bat phone. Yeah, see, so he had a bat phone.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting that we're talking about Hoover too, because you know a lot of this stuff just goes straight back to like Hoover and Dulles, and you know, and the battle that they were having on intelligence with each other. What we're dealing with right now is the culmination of stuff that started in 1947. It kind of hit a high point on November 22nd, 1963, and then we've kind of been in this rough and tumble ever since. And so, you know, we'll see what happens.
And no, Barr did not get his walking papers.
No, but I'm still volunteering at this point when Trump starts his next term that I want to be the executive producer of turning the Oval Office into the boardroom and just perp walking everybody in front of the Resolute desk and having Trump fire them, because I think it would make great television.
I will volunteer as well.
Yeah.
But to the question about the FBI and where are they, I don't know if you saw that Matt Brainard put out an update a little while ago. So he's the guy with the Voter Integrity Project that got all the voter data and ran through it and found all these anomalies and have turned it over to Sidney Powell and the rest of the team, Giuliani and them, to bolster their cases in all these states. We've got dead voters doesn't seem to be the big deal that everybody thought it was. But I think Trump pushed it a little bit this morning because I think that alarms people and they can be like, wait, what? If there's any dead people voting, it's unacceptable. So we get that. But some of the other things that he found are pretty stunning. People moving and voting in both states, and, you know, these high capacity addresses where multiple people are registered to vote there and get vote by mail. And then it ends up being a PO box or like a UPS store or something like this. But he tweeted out earlier today that the FBI has proactively and directly requested from me the Voter Integrity Project findings that indicate illegal ballots. He said, by Tuesday, we will have delivered to the agency all of our data, including the names, addresses, phone numbers, etc. So while there has been legit criticism of the actions of the leaders of the agency over the past several years, I can personally attest to the many patriots within the rank and file who are fighting on the side of the Constitution and law and order. And then he says, like, don't worry, I'm keeping copies of everything.
Yeah, I didn't give them the original.
Yeah, no. And I've got a dead man switch, and it's been
Infinite Apostle. Yeah, show me the perp walk.
Yeah.
Barnes will attest that I've been saying that for 3.5 years now.
Yeah, show me the indictments. Where are they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, trust Barr, trust Sessions, trust Hoover, trust the plan.
No, I trust orange jumpsuits and handcuffs.
Yeah. And I don't even mind door kickers if they're kicking down the right doors.
Right, as long as we get the tip off instead of CNN this time, so we can be there early morning to get the raids on video and live stream them for everybody.
Indeed.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's at Gitmo.
Nobody's at Gitmo.
I bet you a fair amount of COVID victims voted.
One of the data points that the thread was running down yesterday, though, that was that someone had a list of people who allegedly had voted from jail, who all had foreign addresses, that is, from other countries, and there was about 80 or 90 of those, I think, on that list.
Right. And then there was the other data that was unearthed of people that were registered to vote without having, was it names, ages, and dates of birth listed on their voter registration? I can pull up the story. I know it ended up at both.
And in Nevada, I think that there were thousands of people who were registered to vote and the addresses were casinos.
Yes, this is the same data set.
Mm-hmm.
The Epoch Times had it, I believe, and maybe one other outlet. I think, yeah, data scientists sees weird spike in incomplete voter registration data. So more than 30,000. I got to wait for it to load, and then it's probably gonna want me to put in some kind of I think I have to put in my email and all that stuff. So yeah, here we go. Dorothy Morgan is the data scientist that we're talking about here, and she found what she called a historically strange increase in voter registrations missing the sex and age of the voter, as well as the registrations where casinos and RV parks were provided as their home or mailing addresses. So there were 68 voter registrations before in previous elections. So 2016, there were only 68 voter registrations missing that data. But in 2020, there were 13,372 voters missing that data. And about 74% of the allegedly incomplete registrations occurred between July 2020 and September 2020.
That's a bit of a spike.
Yeah.
From
So what was
68
going
to
on then?
13,000.
Yeah, it's a little weird. So it's those kind of things that I think you can get a judge to scratch their head. Although, I don't know. I mean, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court doesn't care that there's a clear violation of the Pennsylvania Constitution. They don't even take up the argument. They just say, oh, you should have filed this a little bit earlier. Sorry. See you later. Bye.
There's no reason to send Lisa Page to Gitmo. San Quentin is perfect. San Quentin is going to have a resurgence because it's right there. Right next in Marin. It's right next to San Francisco and Silicon Valley. So I'm looking forward to. Charles Manson kind of made San Quentin famous for a long time.
Well, can't we make Alcatraz great again?
God, that would be awesome, don't you think?
Yes.
And we could turn it into a TV show.
Absolutely. Whatever happens needs to be live streamed.
Is there a protest in Santa Monica Palisades? I don't know. Not that I can tell. I mean, I live in the bluest blue neighborhood you've ever seen. Although my chicken neighbor put out his Joe Biden sign the day after on November 4th, which I found particularly funny. It was kind of larpy.
Right. I don't know if we pronounce your name Simon or Simone or whatever. The best way to get left-leaning voters interested in election fraud, here's the thing. They were already interested in it. They were interested in it in 2004 when they were in 2000. They were all up in arms about the Diebold machines because there was some connection to the Bush campaign, I think, had a financial link to the guys on that board. Then you can watch the Young Turks made a documentary in 2016 about the voter fraud that went on in the primary election out there to make sure that Bernie Sanders didn't win the state of California. So they're well aware of it, but this goes to my point where they'll just ignore it.
Well, they ignore it if they're in power.
Yes.
Because they always fall in love with the idea that they are going to be able to use it in order to maintain the power. And so when you have an anomaly like Donald Trump show up and it completely disrupts everything, then a couple of things happen. One is they start screaming about how it's not fair, but you have access to media and sound clips and video clips of them complaining about the exact same thing that they're being accused of at the same time, or that Trump is being accused of at the same time. So it's bad, and the stupid thing is, and I just think this is stupid, and it's why politicians are stupid, is that in the 21st century, there are so many different technological ways to solve this problem. That is, ensuring that the vote is. Somebody made a joke that you can count 14 million votes on American Idol during a commercial break. That's not untrue. They do that. And Entomol, I think, is the Australian company that manages that. Entomol has figured out how to do it. So the fact that if you ask somebody for voter ID, it makes you a racist. That idea has got to go away. There are ways to biometrically ensure that you are who you are. Your iPhone knows who you are. Your iPhone knows your thumbprint. Apple could, if you just took Apple and Android functionality off the shelf, you would get 98% reliability on being able to identify people. It's not that hard.
They don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But even more to your point, that you raised, I had gone back and kind of skimmed through the war game scenario that was run by Podesta and Bill Kristol and those guys, and looked at their plan for a contested election. And it's really funny to look at it in retrospect now, because they're pretending like, oh, just shut up and go away, when Trump is basically doing what they said, number one, he would do, and what they encouraged Biden to do if he was on the losing side of a contested election. Right. And so I thought this was really interesting. So they said Biden's strategic assets include Democratic governors and senators and secretaries of state in swing states, notably North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and a broadly shared sense in the Democratic Party that current voting systems, as well as the Electoral College, are structurally anti-democratic, and a widespread, deeply held desire on the part of Democrats nationwide to move on from the chaos of the Trump administration. So then they say all these scenarios examined in their exercises, even as votes were still being counted, Team Biden would quickly move to try to project an ability to govern by announcing cabinet nominees, check, an agenda for the first 100 days, check, and bipartisan support for his administration, check, all of those. So then they decided, this is if they were on the kind of, if it was contentious, Biden and the Democratic elected officials would then take these following steps. And I'm wondering how many people in the Stop the Steal on the right read these and used this as a playbook, because I think it is brilliant. Organizing 100 influencers to denounce efforts to steal the election. Organizing all living presidents to stand with Biden and denounce the Trump administration efforts to subvert the democratic process. Recruiting moderate Republican governors, such as Baker of Massachusetts and Hogan of Maryland, to form an election protection coalition. We'll look for that coming up soon. Working with local Democratic elected officials to call on the adjutant, which I've never heard of, general of the National Guard, along with representatives from the technology sector to monitor vote counting. Can you imagine what would have happened if Trump had said, I want the National Guard there to watch the vote counts? But this was their plan. And then organizing a bipartisan National Day for Restoration of Democracy and National Day of Unity, both including faith leaders. And finally, attempting a capital strike and a work stoppage as part of an overall effort to push corporate leaders to insist that all ballots be counted. So this is how far they were willing to go. And now they're going to pretend that we know of.
That we know of.
Yes, that they put out for everybody. So, yeah. And now they're going to pretend that they're surprised. That report was put out everywhere. It was in the Boston Globe, I believe, to start, and then it made its way to the New York Times. So everybody that's sitting behind a desk at CNN and MSNBC at least knows about it. And yet they're pretending that this is completely out of left field. That's good.
No, Eric Schmidt is not moving to Cyprus. Eric Schmidt is getting a Cyprus passport so that he can hide in Cyprus if he needs to, or he can bank. He can bank out of Cyprus. Those who worked with him said it was the smartest person.
I don't know who any of that is.
Yep, I don't know who that is, Pat.
Yes. That would be nice.
Steve McQueen.
Yes, it is funny.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, this is just the latest Building 7.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would be a fun meme to get. The Biden must concede. That's good. Yep. I don't know.
Is that the on the screen on a Mac? It's the the beach ball.
It could be.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to try to skip down. Let's see. Have the IRS count the votes, one per social security number. I don't know. I'd like to get rid of the IRS.
Yeah, me too.
Can't we just have computers do it?
Can't we just do a VAT? and get rid of. I mean, the whole idea that you're taxing what people make should be illegal. I mean, that should be unconstitutional.
Yes.
If you tax what people are spending, it's equitable, because rich people spend more money than poor people. So
How
rich
about you
people.
just don't tax anything? They don't need it anyway. They just print money.
How do you pay for? Well, that's true.
So it doesn't matter anymore.
Right? Exactly. No. Yes. When you're
Yeah, they've given up a lot of the game here.
right. I mean, they just made up what $12 trillion in the last 365 days just in the United States. I think it's probably more like 80 or 90 globally.
Yeah.
All of the central banks have just printed money.
It's absurd. And yes, everything Trump is doing is exactly what Sanders should do and didn't. That's because Bernie Sanders is a phony and a fraud and a thief.
Or compromise.
I just kind of think that he's just in it to enrich himself and his family.
Yeah.
And the compromise could be, hey, everybody knows your grift, dude, and we'll blow you up.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was one other thing I wanted to talk about today too, which is Bitcoin, because I've been watching it. Jay Dyer kind of took exception to something that I said yesterday, and I like Jay, and I have a slightly different opinion, which is that Bitcoin is a dark bearer instrument, meaning if you're a drug dealer or you're in organized crime and you want to be able to do transactions without governments, without the SWIFT network knowing that you're doing things, Bitcoin is great. It's fantastic. And but it is a bearer instrument, meaning it's a way for Peter to pay Tracy for something without using dollars. And so to that end, it doesn't really matter what the value of Bitcoin is. If the value of Bitcoin is $15,000 today, and I owe Tracy $15,000, I give her one Bitcoin. If it's worth $5,000, I give her 3 Bitcoins. I mean, I go buy them, I send them to Tracy, and then Tracy has the Bitcoin. She can do whatever she wants with it. But one of the accounts that I follow is Whale Alert, and it's whale_alert. And what it is it's a bot. A lot of people go, oh, Bitcoin is anonymous. Bitcoin is, nobody knows what you're doing. And the reality is that every transaction on Bitcoin is public. What's not public is who holds the wallets. That is, who is paying who is unknown. But the interesting thing is about Whale Alert is that it monitors the Bitcoin universe. And when somebody is moving a large amount of Bitcoin in a short period of time, it sends out a tweet about it. And one of the things that I noticed on November 1st was that there was almost $1 billion in Bitcoin wallets moving around, which
Wow.
which I immediately thought, oh, people are getting paid to fix the election, was my thought. And shortly in the last week or so, 2 weeks, Bitcoin has gone up a lot. It's gone up, but if you go back to 2017 and look at what happened with Bitcoin, is that it started pretty around $600. It went up to around $17,000, and then it came back down eventually to about $3,000. And there's an old expression that people use in finance markets sometimes, which is the pig going through the python. And when I saw that money go into the Bitcoin universe and then come out of the Bitcoin universe, because a drop in price is a good indication that people are selling, right? Mm-hmm. Then I was thinking, okay, a bunch of people bought Bitcoin. Then they paid the people in Bitcoin that needed to be paid. And then eventually in the next 3 or 4 months, people started to sell the Bitcoin, and then it went back down again. That's not an indication. People start to think of Bitcoin as like an investment, like it's a thing. And yes, there's a limited number of Bitcoin, right? So the higher the demand is for Bitcoin, the higher price per Bitcoin could be. So if you want to play the George Soros currency game. You can buy Bitcoin like it's a stock, and you can watch it ride up, and then you can sell it. But the only way that you're ever going to make any money is if you sell it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that all of the legitimate crypto exchanges like Coinbase they're all reporting to governments now. So,
Yes.
so if you take out a large amount of money in Bitcoin, in dollars, the IRS is going to know about it. So it's not a panacea, and it's not an investment. And I'm not telling you that I haven't made money doing it, and I'm not telling you that you shouldn't do it. But I think that people who are looking at it as a hedge against the apocalypse or anything else like that need to be aware of the fact that Bitcoin runs on the internet. And people think the internet is free, just like they think Wikipedia is free, and that Twitter is free speech, and that WordPress.com is they're the proponents of free speech. It's like anytime you see the best thing my father ever said to me was, "There's no such thing as a free lunch," and the internet is not free. The internet is controlled by governments, and the day that the governments of the world decide that cryptocurrency is a threat to their sovereignty is the day that Bitcoin will disappear. And if you don't go into it with that understanding, then you're in for a world of hurt. So just understand that Klaus Schwab, if you go to the World Economic Forum, they have a white paper on cryptocurrency about all of the things that they need a cryptocurrency to be. And yes, Jay tweeted at me that he thinks that Google and Apple and one other entity are about.
Facebook had talked about having their own crypto.
Right, they wanted to have their own crypto, and that Amazon, I think he said Amazon, PayPal, and here's the thing about PayPal. I think PayPal does allow you to
transact crypto.
I think I haven't gone and looked. I think it's a wallet. I think it's just a wallet, but without having the ability to convert it to dollars, and maybe they're going through FTC or maybe they're going through the Treasury or the IRS or something in order to get certified so that they can be able to do that. I don't know. But again, the day, if Joe Biden becomes president and Klaus and the World Economic Forum take over the world, they're going to come out with their own crypto, and they're my guess. And they're
already talking about it. They're talking about a Federal Reserve crypto. They're talking about a European Central Bank crypto. The IMF might go to it. So.
Yep, the Federal Reserve. Actually, if you go to the. All right, I'll stop talking about it then. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to answer this question. I think this is the typos that were on Sidney Powell's filing in the state of Georgia. Now we saw some speculation.
Pat had a great speculation. You want to talk about that?
I got to go find it.
So, in the occult, esoteric world, things like William Shakespeare's sonnets, the page numbers were wrong. And Alan Green, who's also got a podcast that goes on at the same time as ours called the Bardcast, Alan Green figured out a few years ago that all the typos in Shakespeare's sonnets are actually encryption codes. They're John Dee inspired encryption codes. And so that you can't look at mistakes as mistakes, you have to look at them as clues for an encryption routine. And our friend Pat Moyse, who we've had on the show before, pointed out that if you take the four letters that are the typos in Sidney Powell's
Here we go.
brief,
So we highlighted the four typos.
Yeah, CCOI. And so what Pat did is he thought, oh, CCOI, that looks like a stock trading sign. And it turns out that Cogent Communications Holdings runs the networks that have something to do with
They run basically the internet. So it says Cogent's network stretches over 207 markets throughout 47 states in North America, Europe, and Asia, with over 58,000 route miles of long-haul fiber and more than 36,400 miles of metropolitan fiber, serving over 900 metropolitan rings.
Is Frankfurt on that map?
I don't know. It's hard to see.
Yeah, it is. We should probably go figure out if Frankfurt is on that map.
It looks like it goes through Germany.
So what you have to understand about the internet is that it's overlapping networks. That's why it's the internet. So Cogent, and when you're a tier 1 service provider that looks like a tier 1 service provider, then those are referred to as peers. So they're peered networks that are connected to one another in order to form the internet. Might as well talk with Max Geyser. I talked to Max. Yeah, Max and I have been friends since 1997. So how long is that? 33 years?
Sure. That's 1997 is 23 years.
23 years.
Yeah, no, we should have Max on here for sure.
Yeah, he'll tell me I'm wrong. That's okay. he'll jump up and down on the furniture while he's telling me I'm wrong.
That's fine.
But he used to jump up and down on the furniture in Starbucks and tell me I was wrong. In Brentwood.
All right, we'll check out Lynette Zhang too. All right, Peter, you have to tweet that Shakespeare thing again. And I believe it was the video, right, where he walked through breaking down the coded stuff in the sonnets that he had found.
Yes, I have a playlist.
And you know what, Peter? We'll be launching the realityos.com website within
put it on there, yeah.
in the next week, if not sooner than that.
You've seen all the work I've done on it so far.
Well, I've almost completed uploading every single one of our episodes to it. So I'd say by next Sunday, we'll have a site and all the stuff can live there.
Right. Yes, the Shakespeare playlist. And if you go to my Peter Duke...
Stop. We'll get it up on the website
never mind,
before the distractions. Yeah, it does sound very Q-ish. It's true. Understand that the way that Q puts out information syncs up very well with the way that people collate esoteric information, where you're looking for clues through coded language that has been passed down to keep things secret over millennia. So once you start studying that stuff, you start seeing those patterns in other places and you question it, because why else isn't, and the idea that Sidney Powell wrote that is ridiculous. She didn't write that herself. She's the lead attorney. There's no way she's getting anywhere near a typewriter and typing up a brief. It's just not happening. It would be like an executive producer getting their own coffee or driving their own golf cart. They don't do that unless they're a control freak that wants to drive the golf cart. But yeah, so somebody else did that. Who it is, I don't know. And I think she likes to wink to the Q crowd. So is she sending them a message and says, hey, put in those typos on purpose so that somebody would do what Pat did and say, that looks like a stock ticker. Huh, what is it? Oh, it's the company that provides the internet service that covers most of the United States. Weird.
Right.
Nah.
The other idea is the Scott Adams attention gambit, which is that anything that attracts attention to something winds up becoming a positive thing. And so if in filing that brief you thought you weren't going to get enough television coverage of the fact that you're filing the brief, put a couple of typos in the brief, because that way you'll make sure that CNN, ABC, MSNBC will all cover the story, because they'll be wanting to make fun of you, but at the same time that they're making fun of you, they're actually telling their audiences, hey, Sidney Powell actually filed a brief.
Yeah, that might have evidence that we keep denying exists.
Right.
Yeah, because I don't know how else do you break through the media bubble at this point in time.
Right.
But I haven't really run into anybody that doesn't believe the election there was some kind of shenanigans going on. So I'd love to run into someone like that in the wild and see if I could deprogram them a little bit.
Yeah, Tom Stricker. Yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, it's a good argument, but who knows if it's true? And occult technique. Yes, the typos. Right, and that's the whole thing about Q. When you start to, and this is, Tracy and I have only learned this in the last few months in doing our research. So thanks to COVID, we have more time to read. Right, but when you realize that, oh yeah, these were mechanisms that were used. A lot of them came out of the Middle Ages, the Knights Templar, because if they got caught doing things, they would get burned at the stake, and they needed to be able to, pass their information around in a way that people would understand it. Then you take a look at Q and you think, oh well, okay, well they're using methods that are 300 years old, so they have some understanding of the occult and the way that things work. Then you ask yourself a question, okay, is this, as Prather said, an operation that's being run or supervised by Ezra Cohen Watnick? Is it American? Is it Israeli? Like, where did Hunter Biden's laptop come from? How did anybody figure out that anything was on Anthony Weiner's laptop? Is there something about laptops that makes them specifically vulnerable? I'm going off on a bird walk because I was talking about the occult and now I'm talking about hacking.
But it's kind of interrelated because you were talking about Q, and but you reminded me, and I don't remember where I saw this article, so I'll have to try to dig it up and have it for next week. But one of the I want to say the left-leaning sites, maybe it was Daily Beast or The Atlantic or something, wrote a long piece about this trend. And now when I go search for it, all I'm getting is K-pop stuff. But they were saying that there were QAnons popping up in other countries. So it's kind of self-replicating. And it's not just, it's Q in Australia echoing American Q. It's the same kind of formatting of information sharing, but localized to that specific country,
right,
which I thought was interesting. So was it just, here's an op that worked really well, run by one intelligence agency or maybe multiple intelligence agencies, and now it's being duplicated all over the world?
It's very interesting.
It is.
And as I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, if I wanted to go set up an organization like that, like the one thing that would, dissemination, the diffusion of dissemination would be paramount, because what you want to do is you want to have it coming from as many different directions as possible. Because if you if you have a bunch of people working together and they're all mapping to similar IP numbers or similar address spaces, then that winds up becoming a problem. I'm going off into a nerd hole. What was the word that you used? I'm spurging.
Yeah, spurging out.
Yeah.
Was the bad lighting at the New Jersey election inquiry a signal that Rudy is in the dark about something? I didn't see the New Jersey election inquiry. I don't know what you're referencing, but I don't think that they're that bright, no pun intended, when it comes to their lighting situation. I don't think Rudy's like, can I get a stand-in over here and see what I'm going to look like under that light? It's just not a thought for them.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on why Bannon wears the same clothes every day on his War Room show?
It's easy to hide a wire.
Why does it need to be wired for his own radio show, Peter?
It's not. It's when he's not on his radio show.
I think it's just because he doesn't care too much about clothes, so he's going the Steve Jobs route of having the same outfit every day.
I don't know. When I met Steve Bannon once, and he was wearing a polo shirt and shorts. So.
I've seen him in different clothes, but that's also, it's in his living room.
Yeah, and the pictures of it, and the reason he and I were talking was because I was giving him a hard time about the pictures that Bloomberg did. And he was going on and on about how Bloomberg wrote 10,000 words on him, and Bloomberg hasn't written a 10,000 word article on anybody since some famous other person, Richard Nixon or Henry Kissinger or somebody. And so he was stoked that it was 10,000 words, and I said, dude, you look like a total schlub. Um,
And he did. Yes, Robert, that's kind of some of the thinking that it could be
maybe
a
the light CA. I don't know what that is.
Peter, fill in the blank. We're
Oh,
talking about codes and you can't figure out the simplest deletion. Yeah. That could be. It could be what Peter's talking about too. It's something that's meant to keep people complacent and believing that something's happening. Tell them trust the plan. Yeah.
yeah. I started researching. I'm listening to a book.
Bannon is not a drunk. I've been to, I would guess, 5 different parties at the Breitbart Embassy, and never once did I see him with a drink in his hand.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed about intelligence people is that they love buying drinks for other people, but they don't partake themselves. It's a thing, which was one of my, kind of my criticisms of Lee when Lee was going after Jack Posobiec, because Jack has been, I think he just celebrated his 15th year of sobriety, but he looked like he was drunk at Milo's party. I could totally imagine Jack looking around. He's the most environmentally aware person that I've ever been in the same space with.
And you don't mean he's green by that. You mean that he is situationally aware.
Jack has amazing situational awareness all the time. He got eyes in the back of his head, and I can imagine that Jack looked around that party and thought, "Oh, all these people are drunk. If I act like I'm drunk, I'll get them to talk to me about stuff." Which, as an intelligence operator, would be a normal thing to do.
You should probably put some mustard on your hat.
If Bannon is not a day drink, I'll eat my hat. Well, get some salt.
Yeah. And then I think this was saying that the hearing in Pennsylvania, I mean, that was thrown together pretty last minute. Nobody put a lot of thought into the lighting. There's not a lot you can do with that. That was controlled by the Pennsylvania Senate. And I think the bigger story of that was the fact that they held it in Gettysburg. That I thought was narrative genius. Because it wasn't at the state capitol in Harrisburg. It was in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and they made mention of it several times.
Yep.
The hereditary trauma, it's true. It could be seeping into his brain and making him say things like, I thought he was right when he said, hey, there were 1.8 ballots requested and 2.5 million returned. And then one of the data nerds says, nope, and that's just the wrong numbers. So that's why that story didn't go anywhere. He flubbed that up.
Well, that's what Tim Pool was saying, that wasn't true. So what's the actual story on that?
Well, the story seems to be that the site where they got those numbers was an aggregator of every state's numbers of how many ballots were requested and sent out. But that they stopped pulling updates from Pennsylvania in September. So the information that I was able to find was the Pennsylvania Attorney General, I think it was the Attorney General, on record on, I think, October 31st, saying 2.2 million had been returned already. And if it kept, that was what they expected, represented 73% of what would be coming back based on the primary, where they had about 80% returned. So that would put it right around 2.5 million that they expected to get back. So it's not that far out of line.
Okay.
But now I can't. Dan doesn't drink, but he stutters real bad. He does not stutter.
He doesn't stutter, and in fact, if he studied neurolinguistic programming, Bannon is an expert speaker. He is really good with words. He knows exactly what he's doing.
And yes, here we go.
Q is civilian energy, top secret. So if you're in an atomic program, my mother had Q clearance at RAND. She was a librarian at RAND in the 1950s, and she had Q clearance. But that meant that she had access to all the top secret atomic energy documents. So if it's gas, electricity, nuclear energy, and it's top secret, it's Q clearance. Yeah, Rudy's not a dunce.
No. As a Trump, you're willing to give Biden a chance? Okay. Sure, 4 years was being called a racist, Nazi, and criticized. Okay.
Yeah, you're okay with the fact that the election was stolen.
Yeah, and you're all right that Biden perpetuated that whole myth, and you're going to continue to be called those things, and now you've got nothing in between you and the people that call you that.
I mean, the people who are making the mistake of saying, "Oh, well, Trump needs to just take the L and walk away," is a disservice to everyone who voted for him, who believes that he won the election.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, we've talked about this before, that people say there's two sets of rules, and I keep saying, no, there's two different games. And the game that we all still want to be playing is the constitutional game. And that's what Trump's fighting for, against the win, you lose game that the left plays. And that's what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did today. We don't care. Oh, Constitution says no? Yeah, no, doesn't matter. That's not the game we're playing.
right, and when you understand that, then you can reframe the way that you look at things. Instead of being disappointed, you can just go do something about it, or choose not to do something about it. But at least understand that it's not the game. I mean, we started off this whole thing by talking about Santa Claus, CLAWS, Santa Claus, because if you've got judges that don't act as if it's real, and you have legislators that don't act as if it's real, and you have prosecutors that don't act as if it's real, then why do you believe that it's real? Because they're in control of the government.
Right.
Civilian special forces. No, special forces report directly to Chris Miller, who is a civilian, but he is ex-special forces.
And now he's the acting he's now the acting Secretary of Defense.
Is he?
I think
After
so.
Esper?
New acting Secretary of Defense. I had pulled up an article about him to tell you that he did in fact start that horse thing that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie about him is called 12 Strong.
Right.
So President Trump announced on Monday that he'd fired Defense Secretary Esper and installed Christopher C. Miller, head of the National Counterterrorism Center, as acting civilian leader of the Pentagon. And so that was from military.com. So I don't think that there is such a thing as civilian special forces. Special forces are all military units or covert operation units that the CIA might run. But what Trump has done, to Peter and my best understanding, is taken the CIA out of that equation. So all those guys are now going to have to report up to Chris Miller or Ezra.
There was a bunch of people in the NSC, between the National Security Council, between the Secretary of Defense and Special Forces. Those people have all been eliminated from the decision chain. So it goes Trump, Miller, military forces. And there's no in-betweens there.
Yep. That is funny.
Yeah.
Yes, of course they're strict constitutionalists. So when it comes to paying your taxes, that's how it works.
Well, yeah, but except that that amendment is unconstitutional.
Yes, and you can fight that, and then you die in jail like Peter Schiff's dad did.
Right.
So I'm trying to think if that. I think it's in Murray Rothbard's Anatomy of a State, which I would recommend everybody read, and I'll throw up a link to it, that he points out that the state always will throw the book at you for any law that violates the state, like not paying your taxes. Or, if you assaulting a police officer, you get more of a sentence than you would if, say, you just have assaulted another civilian. Crimes against the state are persecuted or prosecuted very vigorously. Speaking of, one more thing that I wanted to get to, because I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on the fact that Congress is going to vote next week, it looks like, on a bill that Kamala Harris drafted to legalize marijuana federally, and then also reduce it, let everybody out of jail that's in jail for marijuana offenses.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was being glib when I saw you tweeted that, and I said, "Are they going to let everybody out of jail too?" And you said yes, and then I went and I looked, and you were right.
I know. I read the article. I'm like, what is this? What's this all about?
It's about trying to get popular support for a Biden presidency before he gets in. I mean, one of the things that Trump did after he got elected, he was criticized by the left for it, but Scott Adams kind of praised him for it, is that he went around and started acting like a president. And this is a way for Kamala Harris to start enacting policy and undoing all of the negative, a lot of the negative stuff associated with that was used against her, when she was running the primaries. So I just see it as pure politics. They're going to if they let a lot of people out for weed, that'd be great.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But yes, I would like it not taxed, but you're never going to get that at this point. These states are so damn broke, it's not even funny.
Right.
So they're going to need new tax revenues. You're going to see a spike. As soon as people can go back out to the bars, you better be Ubering everywhere you go, because DUIs are going to go through the damn roof. Petty fines through the roof. They need to get your money back from you. Getting rid of those Masonic police force rumors.
Yeah, what happened? Yeah, what happened with Kamala Harris's Masonic police force? You remember that?
No, I never heard of that.
So there was a group of people that got busted a few years ago that were working for Kamala Harris, and they had police badges. And their police badges had these Masonic symbols on them. Now, a lot of police badges have Masonic symbols, and it's one of the things on my to-do list to understand why there are certain police departments that have, the compass and the eye and all the other stuff on their police badges. Why do some police departments have stars with a certain number of points, and other police departments have stars with a different set of points? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those are all kind of like wink, wink, nod, nod kind of things, and I don't know what any of them mean. I assume there's somebody out there in the world who's an expert on esoteric police badges. But there were these people that were working for Kamala Harris that basically were running their own police department, and they had these really weird badges. I'm not.
Was that when she was in San Francisco as the DA?
When she was the California
Attorney General?
Attorney General. Yeah.
She had her own rogue police force?
Yep.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
So we're going to get roving bands of Masonic Kamala police forces coming after us.
Right. And I think she was Boule, too. Is Kamala Boule?
Boule.
Boule?
Boule. Yeah,
Right.
she's Boule, the secret society.
Yeah.
I believe that she was an Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is one of the sororities. So that was the Boule Secret Society was formed in 1904, May the 5th, I believe, by a group of affluent black gentlemen in Philadelphia who wanted their own version of Skull and Bones. And then the way that spread out was through black fraternities and sororities, specifically 9 of them. And I did a little background on her, and she was, I believe, an Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is one of the sororities. And then her sister, who ran her campaign during the primary, which was one of the worst campaigns of all time, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
And where did the Prince Hall Masons come from?
Prince Hall Masons were started by Prince Hall.
Right, but does that have anything to do with Boule?
No.
No.
It's not as far as I would imagine there's some connection. They're both esoteric, secret society types things.
What's next, Knights Templar?
Yeah. I ran into 2 guys that were dressed as Knights Templar at the Trump rally in Reading, Pennsylvania, and it was Halloween. And I said, "Oh, nice Halloween costumes. Are you guys Knights Templar for Halloween?" And they're like, "No, we're a Knights Templar." And I said, "Oh, okay."
Well,
Sure, dude.
back in the day, Faith Goldie and Lauren Southern had a clothing line called Duvolt, DEUXVOLT, I believe, and they sold all of this, all these garments that look like Knights Templar garments. So
Cool.
I never asked either one of them what that was all about, but I should probably.
Yeah, was that where Prince Hall was from, the Bahamas?
Perhaps.
We're gonna do some, we're gonna put together some deep dives on these things for everybody, and we'll learn, and then we'll teach you what we've learned.
Right, carpenter aprons.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions before we wrap things up?
Yeah, because I've got to go launch a website.
Yeah. And then you can tell us all about it next week, and a bunch of people will be saying, "Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter."
I guess.
I'm sure that they will be. I can think of at least one who's going to be very, very grateful. Yes, Prince Hall Masonry was founded for black men.
Right.
So the deal at the time was that the Masons did not allow black members. So Prince Hall was the name of a gentleman. That was his first and last name. And so he got special dispensation. This is from the Wikipedia page here. It was founded September 29th, 1784. So there are two branches of it. There's the regular Masonic ones, and then the state Prince Hall, blah, blah, blah. So let me say, he had to petition. So prior to the American Revolutionary War, Prince Hall and 14 other free black men petitioned for admittance to the White Boston St. John's Lodge, and they were declined. The Masonic fraternity was attractive to some free blacks like Prince Hall because Freemasonry was founded upon the ideals of liberty, equality, and peace. So, having been rejected by American Freemasonry, Hall and 14 others sought and were initiated into Masonry through Lodge number 441 of the Grand Lodge of Ireland on March 6th of 1775. And so then they brought that back home. I think they actually they went all the way up to the Grand Master of the Premier Lodge in England, the Duke of Cumberland, who issued a charter for African American Lodge number 459 on September 29th, 1784, later renamed African Lodge number 1. So that became the first all black Masonic lodge in the United States, founded by Prince Hall.
It's funny, when John Lewis died, though, I saw a picture of the Prince Hall Masons. And there was a white guy standing in the front there.
Well, I don't think I think now they're much more mixed. I think that outlived its usefulness and they became integrated. All right. Okay. I get that, Arthur, that you would see that and think about the Borat scam and see the connection between those and think maybe Rudy was lit. I just, knowing how those things are thrown together, that was pretty slapdash. And you're shooting at a hotel that probably doesn't have a bunch of lights that are film ready lights. So that whole room looked pretty dark, and I don't think it was poorly lit for what it was. I think it served its purpose. It kind of made it ominous.
Are you talking about Pennsylvania?
I'm talking about the hearing in Gettysburg, yes.
Yeah, I don't know what the weather was like that day. I mean,
It was pretty nice.
I have a friend who runs the Seminary Ridge Museum.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been probably a nice place to do it, or put tents out or something that were out on the battleground or something. And there's a theatrical way that you could have staged.
Yeah, but the problem was they had a bunch of people zooming in, and the internet in that hotel was bad. I mean, that was the one part of the hearing where I was just like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me, when they have a bunch of people waiting in a Zoom call queue. And they're like, every one of them comes on and they're like, can you hear me? Just like, yes, please go.
Right. Yeah. Well, even John O'Loughlin has figured out that you can get, Wi-Fi hotspots to go.
Yes, but the bandwidth that you need for that kind of stuff, like right side broadcasting, probably wouldn't have been able to. Maybe they would have, because they're used to going on site and live streaming it. I think it's fine to have it in a contained room.
Well, you're a production person. You know that you can call around and say, what's your bandwidth? What's your bandwidth? Also, I worked, if a lot of phone companies will pull in bandwidth for you if you give them 2 or 3 days notice. I mean, they don't have to have a huge amount of notice, but
Which they may or may not have had, and then you're not considering COVID in all this,
right.
which is still apparently a thing.
Yeah,
Or at least they're trying to make it a thing in Pennsylvania.
That's my blind spot, is that I don't think it's a thing, and everybody else
Right,
does.
you keep forgetting that everything is slowed down because of that. So,
Right. Anyway.
yeah.
All right. Is that it, Tracy?
I think that's it, Peter.
All right. I think we'll have a website for you guys next week, and we'll be able to just point to things that we're talking about, and that way you guys can catch up. And getting people to catch up is the reason that we're doing this. So thanks to everybody, and thanks to George and John and Addie and everybody else who shouted us out. I don't know how many followers we have on Instagram yet. I mean on YouTube yet, but I guess when we get to 1,000, magical things happen.
Yeah, we've cracked 500, so we're setting a good pace. So if you like it, share it. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the notifications. We're usually here on Sundays at 4 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time, but we might be popping up a couple times throughout the week. You never know. We've got some stuff we want to get into, with maybe bring a lawyer on to explain some things to us that we don't totally understand. And then we've got some occult investigations to also undertake, as we've been made aware that our friend Baphomet, who we've talked about before, who's not really our friend, I'm being sarcastic in case you can't pick that up, has been going viral on TikTok. And we need to put a stop to that and make sure children understand that you probably shouldn't play with demons. It's not a good idea.
It's like playing with Ouija boards.
Yes.
It's fraught with peril.
See The Exorcist.
Indeed. All right. See you later, Tracy.
Good night, Peter.
Good night.